What's up, everyone? How's it going? And if I'm here, and you're here, and the microphone's here, it means they let us get to Friday again. And that means it's time for another episode of TheLeaf podcast. And you're definitely going to want to follow the 3 H's of the channel for this one, because we're going to the desert. And if this is your first time listening to an episode of the podcast, it's a little different from the regular videos on the channel. Instead of just straight stories, I kind of do a commentary thing on it, and I kind of talk about them. And of course, if I use any articles or anything, then I put them in the description, where you can read the rest of them, and read the whole thing yourself. And, with all that said, let's get into it. So this first encounter definitely happened a while ago. It happened way back in 1939, in California. In particular, it happened at a place called Boro, which is 45 miles southeast of Boro Springs. So at Boro, a man was camping all by himself. This was in one of the dry gulches of the area. Now, everything seems to have gone as it was supposed to for his camping trip, except when the night came. He woke up in the middle of the night by a band of 2-legged, hairy creatures that were stalking around the edges of the firelight. They circled around his camp for quite some time, and he noticed that they had silver fur and possessed piercing red eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Now, this pack of creatures didn't seem to do anything to him. They circled his camp menacingly, and then seemed to be somewhat afraid of the firelight. They kept their distance until they eventually just went back off into the desert. Later on, this was called an encounter with the Boro Sasquatch. Now, the question I have for you is, do you think it was a Sasquatch? Do you think it was something else? Because the whole silver fur thing and being afraid of the firelight is kind of unlike other stories I've heard about them. But again, I also talked about there being many different kind of types of Sasquatch in many different areas of the world. And of course, it's quite possible that a bunch of them would band together for survival, for food, for shelter, and all that kind of thing. And it seems like in this case, they were just scouting him out. And it seems that when they realized he's traveling through, as in not living there, they just kind of were like, yeah, it's not worth our time. I mean, there's also a chance that they just weren't hungry. Well, I've talked about that before too, how there's been cases where a Sasquatch will just take somebody, and yeah, you never see them again. But it seems in this case that they were more curious about him, wondering what he was doing, and for all we know, maybe even wondering what the light was. It's really hard to say, and I try not to inject thoughts into the mind of a Sasquatch, but I'm kind of approaching it from a more curious human kind of stance. And then about 30 years later, somewhere near the same region, it was still in the sink, but probably not the exact area, a man named Harold Lancaster had his own encounter with these same things. But in his case, it seems to have only been one of them. He talks about how this huge, hair-covered bipedal creature came out of the wilderness and lumbered straight toward him. But it was not in a curious manner like before. It was very intimidating, almost hostile. He believed himself to be in danger and thought that he was about to be attacked. So, he fired his revolver off into the air, obviously hoping to scare it off so that he wouldn't have to deal with this encounter. And in this case, it seemed to work. He said that the creature jumped about 3 feet into the air before glaring at him and then running back off into the brush. And this is one of those encounters that Lord knows what would have happened if he didn't have a gun on him, or didn't have something to scare it off, to make a loud noise. And obviously we can all imagine the thought process. This huge thing is coming at you, and you have a small gun, so you're hoping that the noise will be scarier than what comes out of it. And in this case, it seems to have worked. However, what we don't hear about is the encounters where it unfortunately didn't work, or the people just don't want to talk about it for fear of being called crazy. Now, this other encounter, we go to Mexico in the state of Chihuahua. This one took place a lot more recently, not super recently, but 1989 into 1990. And in this case, it was a group of teenagers that were exploring the caves of a place called Sero, Pagarito. And I don't know about you, but I totally understand the need to explore things, especially with friends. There are no caves where I live, so we just explored the woods, and we saw a lot of weird things out there, and this was no exception, although this is a little more extreme. The group did find a freshly killed deer, and there was more than one of them. Now, the other thing about these is that they had these odd perforations on their necks. These perforations formed a triangular pattern, and this of course was a little deeper into one of these caves. So of course, they're already on edge. They realized that no puma had done this. And then, as they're examining this and kind of low-key freaking out, they hear a blood-curdling squealing sound, and then the air became filled with the smell of burning wood or something like it. Now obviously, if they're not already on edge, they're going to be terrified now. And then they looked and saw a hunched-over humanoid figure crouched upon a rock outcropping about 15 meters away from them. The creature that they saw wasted no time and started coming toward them. The group emptied their pistol at it, and the bullets seemed to have no effect at all. They yelled, turned tail, and began to run for their lives. And when they were running, they reported passing yet another creature. This one, though, was described as having metallic green skin, and this creature was only 80 centimeters or 31.5 inches high. I think it's safe to say that those boys didn't go back to that cave. I know I wouldn't. So what do you think those creatures were? What do you think the larger creature was? Better yet, what do you think the smaller one was? The whole metallic green skin thing kind of brings to mind one of the green aliens. Or the other thing you would associate with having green kind of bright skin would be a reptile or a reptilian of some sort. Now, there's obviously been tons and tons and tons of stories about people encountering reptilians deep in caves. Do you think that's what this was? Do you think that it was some kind of other cryptid that's not really talked about, one that might be only living there? Do you think it could be some kind of crawler, especially the taller creature? With the smell of burning wood, I'm thinking of either like a campfire smell or like that kind of musky smell that you get with wood that's been seasoned that you burn in the wintertime, or even sulfur. So it's really hard to say what exactly the smell was. But as always, let me know what you thought it was down in the comments. And this next encounter is from a soldier in Afghanistan. He says, "When I was serving in Afghanistan, I witnessed some strange stuff. First off, I did not see any creatures, but I encountered some weird stuff. One of the roles I served was essentially a, quote, hearts and minds role, in that we made an effort to get to know the locals and get them to look at us in a better light. Just simple things like giving out food, building things, bringing the kids footballs, etc. One family we constantly met was a family of goat farmers. Over the weeks, we got pretty friendly, and we would share stories through our translator. One day, I was talking to him about his goats and how hard life is out here. He said it was fine, but the only thing that bothered him was the behemoth. I thought initially that was like the local Taliban strongman or something, but he said no, it's an animal. Now this next bit he said is through a translator, so bear in mind that they were both having trouble describing what he meant. He called it the running wolf. The translator didn't really know exactly what he meant by this, but he just said again, a wolf that runs like a man. The man then asked us to follow him. Initially, I refused, but eventually I relented, as I felt like that he would not lead us to danger, and it may offend him more not to. He led us to a cave about 30 minutes away. In this cave, we found what looked like crude drawings on the wall. Nothing you could make out well, but definitely something someone had drawn by scraping a rock, but more disturbing was several gouged lines in the rocks, about 1/3 of an inch deep and about 1 foot long. We had a joke about it, but I tried cutting a similar mark into the wall with my knife. I couldn't do it. Bear in mind that I've been a power lifter since I was 16, so I'm pretty strong, but I couldn't even come close. The biggest red flag, however, was the remains of what I think was a goat carcass. Now this cave was about 300 yards up a 60% incline. I don't know how a fox, which is the only predator I saw out there, could A, kill a goat, B, drag it from the closest farm, about 1.5 kilometers away, up that slope into the mountains. It freaked me out, to be honest. For the remaining 3 months of that tour, I heard noises that sounded like a woman wailing. It might be something, or it might just be a grown man being scared by a herder's story. I'm not weighing in on it, if they are real or not, but I did find it very compelling. So, of course, what do you think this was? The first thing that comes to my mind is a dogman or a werewolf or something similar. Although a long time ago, I know that the guy said a wolf that runs like a man, but a long time ago I did these stories where it was cat people, like people that looked like the cats from Scooby-Doo Zombie Island, which of course in my opinion is the best one, but besides that, they looked like that and they had very sharp claws and they were just like tearing through the carcass of something. I don't remember what it was, but like people had gone missing up there and everything. So it also reminded me of that, but of course, a wolf on 2 legs just kind of screams dogman, werewolf, that kind of thing. Not only that, but 1/3 of an inch deep marks, especially in rock like that, that'd be crazy. And if you were ever wondering, this is just about a language thing that was in the story. If you were ever wondering how someone can go back and forth from inches to kilometers, like imperial to metric, in Canada we use both. I know that nobody in Canada is going to be surprised by that, but apparently some other people are. So in Canada, when we're measuring distance, we usually use kilometers, but when we're measuring something or doing construction, we use like inches, feet, that kind of thing. A lot of times too, we also use Celsius and Fahrenheit. We kind of just have a general idea of what means what. It may seem a little convoluted, but it works. So we just keep using it. But yeah, that was just if you were confused about how it goes back and forth between inches and kilometers. So again, let me know what you thought it was down in the comments. Do you think it was a dog man, a werewolf, one of those cat creatures? Do you think it was something else entirely that I'm missing out on? And this next encounter is also from Afghanistan. So he says, I was an investigator with CID from 2004 to 2009, and I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Most of my work was related to various schemes, bribery, money laundering, theft, etc., by enlisted personnel. In 2005, I was informed that I would be embedded with an army infantry unit in a mountainous region, the Sulaymaniyah Governorate, or northeast Iraq. Once I reached my assignment location, we were briefed on strange activity that had occurred in a particular area just a few miles from the Iranian border. We started the investigation by reading reports that came from a few local villagers who stated that people were being hunted in the mountains by an unknown creature. One man told me that the Iranians called it a ghoul. He had never seen it, but it was described as a tall, man-like creature with very long arms and legs who fed on human flesh. I reported the information I gathered to my superiors after returning to the unit HQ. A few days later, I was ordered to return to the area of the strange activity and investigate it further. An infantry squad with a squad leader was assigned to accompany me. The general consensus was that it was likely a soldier who left his post and went AWOL, or batshit, and started causing problems. Armed conflict can induce the worst in people to surface. If this was the case, and the individual was killing non-combatants, our job would be formidable. So after a few days of surveillance and searching, we had no clue what we were dealing with. If this was indeed a soldier or other civilian man, we would have seen him or gathered some evidence. I was starting to believe that this was a wild goose chase, but the villagers were very adamant that there was something hunting them. One evening, the squad leader and I were going over a report when we were alarmed by a god-awful scream that came from the direction of a mountain pass that we had just searched a few hours before. A few local people who had been outside quickly made their way home. It was obvious that they had heard this scream before. Within the hour, the squad and I were slowly entering the pass. It was night, but the moon was very bright, so we were able to see around a bit. We searched the entire area for several hours, using night vision, high-intensity lights, and we found nothing. Not a footprint, not a remnant from any creature fitting the description. I've always wondered what we heard that night. I have asked quite a few learned people for their opinion, but with little satisfaction. There were many strange instances in Iraq that just never made the light of day. I heard of some, but I'm positive that most of them were just filed away. So of course, let me know what you think this was. I know that a lot of people had heard of ghouls before in various pop culture, shows like Supernatural, Tales from the Crypt Keeper, that's kind of dating me, but used to deal with ghouls a lot. And I think something in particular that's pretty terrifying about that story is that in other folklore from other countries, a ghoul can also take the form of somebody else and pretend to be them. And not only that, I think that something was happening, because generally you don't just hear disembodied screams come from a canyon or a pass. And the fact that the villagers all just were like, yep, that's my sign to go home, shows that they really did think that something was going on, or that something was going on and they had heard it before. So what do you think it was? Let me know in the comments. In this last encounter right here, we're going back to California and Mexico, the Vizcaino Desert to be specific. On the evening of July 2nd, military intelligence units were called out to an area of the desert to investigate a UFO crash. When they got to the scene, they found exactly what they were looking for. It was this weird, ethereal-looking, oblong metal craft. It looked like it had been broken in half. It was also surrounded by this terrible odor. Now, strangest of all were the 4 bodies that they found with this craft. Each of them were enormous. They were said to measure over 9 feet in height, and they were covered in hair. They had squashed faces and sort of ape-like features, but there was no hair on the face, flat, wide noses, and their mouths were twisted open in grimaces of agony, with exposed, smallish fangs. They were also wearing some kind of sandals or shoes with very thick soles, and what looked like copper belts with huge buckles that lined with small buttons. But other than that, they were completely naked and carried no tools. Allegedly, one of the creatures was even still alive, but died very shortly after. According to the report, the U.S. military moved in, and everything was whisked away to Yuma Air Base in Arizona, and no one's really sure what happened after that. So, I don't know about you, but the first thing that I thought of was like Planet of the Apes. I don't know, but that's just what the first thing was that came to my mind. The second image was kind of like a Bigfoot, but dressed in like Greek or Roman clothing. And then the third was just thinking of Chewbacca from Star Wars. But of course, this would be insane to see. Imagine being a soldier and just called out because there was a crash in the desert and you're like, oh great. And you're thinking that there's going to be plane wreckage everywhere. And then you go there and it's this crazy looking craft. And not only that, but there's 4 non-human bodies there. Do you think that these were some kind of Sasquatch-like entity? Do you think that they were something else entirely? As always, let me know down in the comments. Of course, the links to the full articles that I used will be in the description below, and you can read the full thing because there's so much more in the article. I just picked out a couple and then kind of skimmed over them. So you can go look at those if you want to, and if you haven't already and you enjoy the show, then please like and subscribe. And there's a Patreon and a PayPal if you want to support me a little more. I post Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, so be sure to tune in for Sunday's video. I think you'll like it. And with all of that, thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.